Yo, what's up, guys? This is Kayak Mike. Actually, let me move my. Trying to figure out a way. Well, I guess you could figure out a day and time it is based on the weather that I'm currently looking at. This video is going to go over my Rocky Fork prep. I'm fishing Rocky Fork this weekend on the 7th. It is currently Friday night. And yeah, I'm just going to go over my prep. I might put this at the end of the video, beginning of the video. I might do it as a brand new video. Who knows? But yeah, this will be after. I'm gonna post this after the tournament and just show you everything I do in preparation for a tournament. I'm mainly an administrator now, but there is a local trail in Ohio that I'm going to fish this year. I'm gonna try and get my 5 events in for their points. So yeah, let's go through it. First things first. I find the city that it's in. Get the forecast. Today's Friday. Tomorrow's Saturday. Tournament Sunday. Some things I'm looking at is up and down right here. Is there a lot of fluctuation up and down? A lot of fluctuation up and down, typically to me, kills the bite. So the fluctuation of temperature is the opposite of a consistent bite in my experience. If there's a lot of fluctuation, the fish are going to turn on, off, on, off, on, off. They're not going to consistently be feeding. Their metabolism is not going to consistently be on. What I like to see is a steady line. Whether it's no matter how cold or warm it is, I like to see a steady line. So I'm guessing Sunday the bite's going to be relatively tough. I'm also guessing Sunday the bite's probably not going to be its best till about noon to 2. Lines out is 3 p.m., lines in is 7 a.m. We're going to have freezing temps at lines in. Now it can change. We're 3 days out. But I start looking at this stuff typically, if I know the event's coming up, I start looking at this stuff about a week out, and then I check every single day. You can learn over the years a lot about fish patterns strictly based on temperature, not even including the wind and precipitation. Um, so, like when I'm fishing the Ohio River, it doesn't matter if the Ohio River is 41 degrees. If I know for a fact it was just 38 degrees a day or two before and it jumped to 41, that's a massive jump. You can probably drag. I've already proved this with one of my fishing partners, Pam. We went out and fished a Little Miami when there was a 3-degree water temperature jump, and we were in a live tournament. We caught 15 to 20 fish that day live, while everyone else in the country combined in that tournament caught 2 or 3. And everyone was like, "They're dragging." You can learn a lot based off of these temperature gauges. And what happened in that certain scenario, the water temps were 38 degrees. They jumped up to 41 for 2 or 3 days straight before the tournament. And come that day, everything was leveled out. All the temperatures were leveled out. And now their metabolism is set there. There was that jump in temperature. Now they're actively feeding. You don't necessarily have to know, or the water temps don't have to be a certain degree for their metabolism to jump and spike for them to feed. A lot of it is based on how high it has jumped from where it's at. So, like I said in that example where Pam and I were fishing, that 3-degree temp turned their metabolism on because it was 3 degrees warmer for them from like 38 to 41 over that course. That's going to turn them on a lot more than staying about 38. So I look at the normal. Now these aren't water temps, obviously. These are just general temps. These are air temps. But we're going to go into local knowledge here in a little bit to try and get a feel of water temps. Next thing I do, I pull the lake up right here. I find all the boat ramps. There's actually a good chance I'll be launching from Fisherman's Wharf because my buddy who's going to be giving me bait, he said he's going to be launching from there. So there's a good chance that's where I'm going to be launching from for 2 reasons. Not so much because of the bait. I'll actually sacrifice good bait to get a better launch location, but we'll go more into that in a second. Over to local knowledge. This is a message I just sent to someone I know who fishes there relatively often. Um, so I'm going to speak with him tomorrow, and less information is more. A lot of the times when you're going to go fish somewhere, especially somewhere new, you don't want to go asking 10 people stuff because you're going to get 10 different answers. You want to ask 1, maybe 2 successful fishermen, not your buddies. I know we all love our friends, but your buddies aren't always the best fishermen. You want to find one or two successful fishermen that are willing to talk to you about the lake, or the river system, or wherever you're fishing. And local knowledge is great knowledge, but I've also found the best local fishermen normally aren't willing to talk. The local fishermen that are willing to talk are normally the guys who, my daddy caught a big fish here 30 years ago. All right, well, what's the pattern? What have the water temps been? What speed have you been moving at? Have you been suspended? Have you been dragging? Have you been anchoring? Have you been hitting ledges? Have you, what's the surface temperature versus the bottom temperature that you like? They're normally not going to know all of that. So I typically try and speak with someone local who's going to be able to at least supply me data, even if they can't give me patterns per se. I'm pretty sure I know the pattern anyway. But even if they can't really put me on a pattern, I need data. I need physical data that I can reference from my previous fishing trips. And speaking of previous fishing trips, very first thing I do when I'm fishing a new body of water is I go to Navionics, I bring it up, I look at that body of water. This is Rocky Fork. And then I immediately go to a body of water that is similar to it that I have fished in the past. And I just start jogging through my head. Okay, how did I fish this lake this time of year? Um, so Cowan Lake is essentially identical in structure to Rocky Fork. Let me walk you through it. Check this out. Rocky Fork, extremely shallow on the west end, deep on the east end. I believe the dam is on the east end. There's not a lot of, I don't want to call them tributaries, but branches. There's not a lot of branches. It looks very consistent. This seems pretty flat. I'm assuming it's a mud bottom. I'm pretty sure I'm relatively accurate on that. Navionics, although it has its flaws on the Ohio River, pretty dang accurate on lakes. Even the free version, pretty dang accurate. Now, locals might zoom in on this point and say, this point isn't exactly here, it comes out to here. Okay. For studying purposes, Navionics is relatively accurate. It's going to give you the ledges. You're going to have a good idea how far, like right here, I'd be willing to bet right here, that's a steeper drop off. And I'd be willing to bet right here, it's not as steep as a drop off. That's the information I'm looking for. I'm not necessarily targeting holes like this. This is the kind of stuff that may or may not exist on Navionics, but I'm looking more for the ledges. I'm looking more for general depth, and I'm looking for, holes and pockets. This one could be true. This could be a hump. It may not be. Like, this is actually, if this is actually accurate, this is a hump. I might scout this in the morning or during the day while I'm fishing, and if that is a hump, depending on which way the wind's blowing, because I'll more than likely be dragging, I might drag around this hump. That's something you would not see here. So let me pull this up. Where's that branch? So it's saying there's a hump right here. That's something you can't get just from Google Maps. So good. So we have our information. Back over to Cowan Lake. Cowan Lake. It is shallow east. It is deep west, and it has its dam right here. I would put $1,000,000 on it that this lake has similar to identical patterns as Rocky Fork. Look how close they are. They are almost exactly the same in structure. They have very little branches for the fish to go up into. They are shallow on one end, deep on another. There's not a lot of pockets. There's not a lot of holes. There's really only one hump, and it's this one right here that comes out. And this one's actually accurate. I can't tell you how many times I've been hung up on this. It drives me insane. So now I'm going through my personal Rolodex of how have I fished this lake this time of year, these kind of water temps, these kind of conditions. I have always fished it shallow, and I have numerous videos of me fishing this shallow, and typically right around here is where I have done my best. There's an island. There's an island on Rocky Fork. This is about 10 to 15 foot deep. So now I'm going to go back to Rocky Fork. First things first, here's an island. However, I don't see a lot of 10 to 15 foot deep over here, but I do see 10 to 15 foot deep over here. The difference, though, is it's next to deeper water. On Cowan, Cowan doesn't have any real pockets that are next to deeper water. You kind of have this where it comes up for a second and goes down, but that's not the same characteristic as it is on Rocky Fork. Also, islands tend to get bombarded with at a tournament. They tend to get just bombarded by fishermen. So I'm gonna put money on it. The majority of the fishermen are going to be fishing this island. I'm gonna put money on it that the majority of the talk about this lake is fishing's best by the island. Uh, just my experience. Everyone loves to talk about how great fishing is around islands. So I'm gonna have two plans here. I have a feeling this is going to get hit real hard in the morning. I'm going to avoid this like the plague in the morning. I'm going to let all those guys drag this island, wear out those small fish all day, and then when the bigger fish start turning on later on in the day, because big fish they feed when they want to, little fish are going to feed when it's when it's more opportunistic for them, so they don't get preyed on themselves. I feel like it's going to be a better bite in the afternoon. My trolling motor can go about 5 miles an hour. This whole entire lake is 5.71 miles long from here to here. I pulled up mapmyrun.com and I just put it across the lake. So in theory, I can get across the whole lake in 1 hour. My 100 amp hour battery on a lake, I could run wide open on this for 4 or 5 straight hours if I wanted to. So I'm not worried about making any long runs if I have to. So I'm more than likely going to start my drag here. Why? Like I said before, on Cowan Lake, 10 to 15 foot deep. This time of year, these water temps, I'm guessing the water temps are between 45 and 55 degrees. 55 on the very, very, very high end. I am assuming they're not going to be close to 55. 45 on the low end. I know someone who has just fished East Fork. They told me East Fork Lake is in the low 50s, high 40s. This is a little more north of East Fork. Where's East Fork? East Fork's around. Where are you at, East Fork? Here's East Fork Lake right here. We're a little more north of East Fork. So, and I know East Fork and Cowan, they're kind of far away, but they typically have relatively same water temps as well. So I'm looking at 45 to 55 degree water temps based on previous knowledge and based on what people have told me from East Fork when they're crappie fishing. I know for a fact I've done extremely well 45 to 55 degrees in 10 to 15 foot of water. So I'm going to be launching. I believe this is where the wharf is right here. It says Marina. Let's just go double check. Is this the wharf? Fisherman's Wharf? Yes, I was correct. So there is a point. I'm going to use this point as a reference, and I'm going to use this point as a reference. The back of this point, I know it's kind of a rounded edge, but I'm going to call this a point. The back of this point is my 10-foot marker. Now, our water has been extremely high. We have had a ton of rain. So my 10-foot marker on game day might be about here, but I'm going to use this marker as my 10 to 15, or my 10-foot marker when I get there. So let's go back. There's this point, essentially the very first point when you come out of Rocky Fork. I'm going to be starting in here and dragging two from the west to the east as long as the wind is cooperating. If the wind is not I'm going to be going this direction on the lake more than likely, or this direction on the lake more than likely, because I want to be going up or down in depth so I can kind of target where they're at. If I'm going west to east, and I'm starting, I do the same thing. I do the same exact thing on Hoover. If I'm starting to go up, or I'm sorry, down in depth, 10, 11, 12, 13, and as I cross 12, 13, I get a bunch of bites. I don't get any more at 14, 15. I didn't get a lot at 10, 11. Well, then I will change my tactic. I will find where it's most consistently 12 and run north, south, north, south. Because as I'm pulling across 12, 13, if they're hitting there, that's where I'm then going to start targeting. I'm going to start targeting where they're hitting, as opposed to circling all the way back to 10 and then going through what I believe is that school. I'm going to try and target where I believe they are at that depth. So I will try and then go north to south, or north to south, or south to north, given the wind is cooperating. The wind can completely throw this all off. If you live in Ohio, you understand that the wind can start this direction and then 10 minutes later be going this direction, and then 10 minutes later be going this direction. Fortunately and unfortunately, in Ohio, we have extremely tough fishing conditions, but it makes for relatively good anglers. So that's going to be my initial plan. I'm going to be launching Fisherman's Wharf more than likely. I might be meeting up with my buddy for fresh bait. He got fresh bait. He said he's going to hand me fresh bait. Shout out Brandon Hunter. I'm going to come out. I'm going to find where that 10 foot is. I'm going to, before the tournament starts, hopefully, there's a chance I show up at 10 a.m. Tournament's already started for 3 hours. Like, it's me. There's a chance I do that. But ideally, I want to be launched by 5 a.m. I'm going to find my 10 foot marker. I'm going to find my 15 foot marker. I'm going to, with my, so on my Lowrance unit, I have the self mapping. I don't like preloaded maps. I hate them. In a boat, I understand why it's good in a boat because you make a lot of long runs, etc. I like the self mapping so I can, to the foot, know exactly what I'm fishing on that game day. I'm going to have all of this mapped before I even start fishing. Everything 10 to 15 foot, I'm just going to make runs up and down, up and down, up and down, so I know where every little crevice is on that 10 to 15 foot, uh, 10 to 15 foot, uh, spur, what's the word I'm looking for? Spot. Don't be surprised if I try and find these humps on here, if they do or don't exist. I'd be willing to bet they do exist, and I'd also be willing to bet the local fishermen hammer these humps pretty hard. Because underwater humps and underwater holes, they're, you know, that's kind of like fish in a barrel. Those typically get hit pretty hard for all species, not just catfish. But I will not be dragging over top of it. I will be dragging beside it. I might throw a planer board like I'll figure out where the hump is exactly. I might try and throw a planer board that kind of rides it, but humps can also be notorious for snags. So I like to ride the edge of those humps. And yeah, that's essentially my tournament prep. I'm gonna do all of this every single day leading up to this tournament. I'm gonna do it again tomorrow. It's what 11:14 at night. I'm gonna do it again tomorrow. I'll put a little more study into this section of the lake, but my initial game plan, if it works, you'll see this video. I'll be launching the wharf. I'm going to be mapping all this out. Why am I mapping it out? Because I have a similar fishing history on another body of water where I have been extremely successful. I also believe this island is going to be absolutely smoked by boaters and other kayakers in the morning. I'm going to hope that the big dogs aren't feeding then and they're going to wear out all the small fish. If I do not have success 10 to 16 foot, I will then make the long run to the island. By noon, 1 o'clock, unless the fishing's on fire the entire day, I'd be willing to bet the people who don't have luck at the island have already left when I believe the best fishing by the island is going to happen. So that's my game plan. Um, you'll see this video if it works out. This is typically how I go about all my tournament planning. And yeah, Kayak Mike out of here.